to have director Wes Anderson with us tonight. This is part of our series of conversations with actors and filmmakers in partnership with the New York Film Festival. Some of you may have been here earlier for Antonio Banderas, who is also amazing. So a really big night for us. But sit back, relax, and enjoy this amazing conversation with Wes Anderson. Please put your hands together and let's bring him to the stage.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I guess we'll just get started. Since we're in New York, and this is kind of an imaginary fairy tale kind of New York, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about the genesis of this film, how New York sort of sparked the rest of the story.
Sure. Let's see. This was a movie that I had. The first few movies I made were all, in fact, movies that I had kind of had little treatments of. When I applied to some film schools. I didn't actually get into any other film schools, but these were my treatments. So this was my third kind of treatment for film school applications. And I didn't really know New York at all at the time, so it was sort of inspired by movies and plays and books about New York. And I always loved the New Yorker magazine. And I was really kind of fixated on New York for many years, and that's why I came to live here. So anyway, it sort of came out of that.
Was this before Bottle Rocket? Was it before when was when did the period come out?
Well, I didn't really write anything. I just had this sort of idea of it before Bottle Rocket or any of those things. But the movie was really written after we did Rushmore, which is the second one I did. The other, I'll say the other, there was another movie that was a big influence on it, which was a Louis Malle movie called Le Feu Follet. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a great movie.
The, kind of suicide kind of one.
Yeah, it's the suicide one.
For lack of a better word.
Yeah. And that one sort of like relates to some Scott Fitzgerald story, to several Scott Fitzgerald stories. I think that it was but those were an inspiration for it, and they were for me also.
It does feel like almost a 1970s New Yorker, as if you came across one and came into this fable sort of story.
Yeah, I think there were some parts of the movie that we were thinking of 30s or 30s and 40s New York, kind of like Kaufman and Hart New York. And then there were other parts that were more like William Friedkin New York, I think, that we kind of pictured. Or like The Warriors, if you ever saw that movie, The Warriors. We had some graffiti and stuff that we took from The Warriors.
Another very New York movie. But yours is kind of New York hidden. Can you talk a little bit about that, how there's not really a lot of specific landmarks, and you can tell you're in New York, but it's a different kind of New York for a bit more?
Yeah. Well, we didn't, because it's sort of a pastiche of New York, I guess, if that's a word. I'm not positive I'm using that correctly, but I think I am. We wanted to avoid, and we never say exactly New York. Like there's a 375th Street Y, I think, or something like that. And there are various places that are almost like New York. So we wanted to kind of avoid the Empire State Building or that sort of thing. In fact, on the first day we had, it was the first day with Gene Hackman. It was the first day of the movie, and he had a scene with a actor who's an old friend of mine named Kumar, and we had Kumar was blocking the Statue of Liberty. Our Gene said to me, it's great, you got the Statue of Liberty here. I said, well, Kumar's going to stand in front of it so you don't see it. And he said, that's stupid. That was the foot we started on.
This film now is 10 years old. Might make some of us feel a little old or older. How do you look on it, looking back, like when you think about it in your career, I guess, your oeuvre?
Well, I don't particularly. I don't really. I haven't seen it in a long time, and I think there's gonna be a Blu-ray sometime pretty soon, so I'll see it. I'll have to like approve the transfer or something. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed making the movie. It was a very good experience, and it was nice working in New York, and we had a great group of actors, and so it's a very fond memory anyway.
Your first two films, obviously, you worked with a lot of close friends and collaborators. Obviously, those collaborators became friends. But this was your sort of first film that you had a lot of, I guess, for lack of a better word, a lot of big star power in it. What were the choices going into picking those people, and what was it like in those experiences directing those people for the first time?
Yeah, well, it was. I mean, I always feel a little bit more stress when I'm working with actors who I haven't worked with before. But this one, it was mostly very. It was. They were people who were happy to be there on the whole, and we had a good rapport. A number of them, I had written the parts for them, and I'd met them before they'd read the script. We talked about it, and I'd sort of prepped them that this was coming, and that was kind of a good thing. Gene Hackman was a different thing. I mean, in fact, ever since we made this movie for years, anytime any group of us are together, we always talk about Gene Hackman endlessly. And he was great to work with, and he was very exciting to work with, but he was sort of separate from everybody else, from all of us, and he's very scary.
He's not going to be here later tonight, right?
No.
And so, in what ways is Gene Hackman scary? Is his presence?
Well, he's first. I think he was one of the reasons. Many of these actors were very well known. And there were stars, but he was the one who everybody was really interested in. I mean, he was the one. He was legendary, and people were excited about the possibility. And it was very difficult to get him to agree to the movie. He didn't. I almost feel like he was at a disadvantage because he didn't really want to do it. And I feel like I wouldn't even. I'm not even sure how this occurred, but I do think I sort of forced him to do it. Yeah, over a long period of time. I mean, it was really a year and a half. I met him. He didn't want to meet me. I pressed to meet. We met, and he told me, I don't like it when people write parts for me.
You had specifically written this for him.
Well, I was really just beginning to write it, and he said, I don't like when people write parts for me. I feel like people. I don't want somebody to give me their idea of who I am. I'd rather just write a part. And so he had warned me that he didn't want me to do that, and I did that anyway. And I just wore him down. He also, I don't think he was really used to. It wasn't really a big part of his repertoire to be paid scale. Which is a very low rate for anybody who doesn't, or for Gene Hackman, it means working for the lowest amount that you're legally allowed to pay, and everybody was being paid that way, so there was really no way around it, and that was part of the process too.
On the page, your work is very specific. If you've read any of Wes's screenplays and you watch the films, you can see things that are exactly done the way they are on the page. How did Gene respond to that? And did he have his own ways of interpreting things? And did you ever go, Gene, that's not how it was intended?
Well, it's funny that because I actually there's the thing, because I sometimes he would not he always knew his lines exactly. He's very prepared, but sometimes he didn't know certain actions, and there was at one point I said, after a few takes or something, I said, I mean, it says you're supposed to cry. And he's where's that? And then I looked at his script, and everything is crossed out except his dialogue. That he has his script prepared that way. He really doesn't want to read that. He just wants to know what he's supposed to say, and and that, I mean, there's something, if you spend a certain amount of time just punctuating it, and you would like for it not to be crossed out. But he has his. I think his reason is he wants the text, he needs to know what he's got to say. But beyond that, he wants to make it completely spontaneous and to feel like he's making this up in the moment. And more than anybody else I've ever worked with, he does that. And when you're standing on the set, it's sometimes very surprising to see him sort of just burst into the scene.
I've always read and heard that he's an actor that doesn't like to wait and just likes to charge into things and get like, when are we shooting? Just tell me when we're shooting, and I don't care about the rest.
Yeah, I think I think that's what I think he's. I mean, and then I will allow us to change the subject. But I think he's done so many movies over so many years that he likes acting, but he's really probably lost some of his patience for all the rest of it. From action to cut is what he enjoys.
Yeah. How much rehearsal time did you get with everybody else, like Gwyneth and people like that?
Well, I don't really think the way we did the movie, it was sort of scheduled where we have one person 5 weeks in, and where we were picking up. We had to sort of build a jigsaw puzzle around the schedules of all these people. So there wasn't really a lot of rehearsal, but we'd have a couple of days here or a couple of days there to get certain groups together. We never got the cast together, and that's actually the thing. That's what I want to try to do from now on. I do think it just can make a huge difference, and there's freedom in being able to spend 2 weeks with the whole cast. I feel like there's some filmmakers who always require that. I would like to become one of those.
Can you talk a little bit about we spoke a little bit about the writing process with Owen in writing this film? You had obviously written 2 films with Owen before, and now you did your third. Can you talk a little bit about how that worked?
Yeah, well, it was, it's kind of, I think we sort of dreamed up the sensibility of it together a bit. We weren't, I guess the thing is, our writing process has been very different with each movie, and some scenes we worked on together very closely, and other scenes not so much on all the movies. So anyway, it's kind of hard to answer because it's varied so much over the years.
You have sort of a propensity for these adult figures that are sort of bad influences on children. Bill Murray in Rushmore is not the greatest father figure, and so forth down the line. These sort of immature men and maybe precocious teens. Where does that come from?
Oh, I don't know, but I mean, just from that scene, he doesn't seem like such a bad influence.
Not a bad influence, but I don't know. If someone here was seen throwing water balloons at a car with their grandfather, maybe they'd think that grandfather wasn't the greatest choice.
People can get hurt. Yeah. But I don't really know where that comes from. It's sort of thing that I don't think about. Why do I like these kind of scenes or these kind of characters? Really, I probably should, or maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. But I don't have any real theory about that. My father is very unlike that character. For instance, he's he's very entertaining, but he's not mean or wild, really.
So let's talk about the music a little bit. It was obviously a huge, integral part of this film. It's about some of the choices and some of the. There's also a lot of, well, not a lot. There's a few New York, the Ramones and the
Right.
Velvet Underground, and talk about the music, building it, and coming to these choices. And
Yeah, well, there's a lot of music in it. I think there were a few pieces, several pieces actually that I had sort of had in mind writing the script. There's a Ravel piece that's in the beginning, or that it's not that one. It's before that in the movie. In fact, that the piece it was in the first clip is based on something by a Romanian, I think he's Romanian composer, George Inescu, but it was adapted by Mark Mothersbaugh into something that's more fitted to the movie. But there was a Nico song that was sort of the first real scene I had in mind for the movie was set to that, and there's a Ramones one that was, and that song that Paul Simon song that was something that was sort of planned in the script. But then a lot of the music comes in during the editing, and I guess I did have a thought that that the music would be connected to New York as much as it could be. But even like we had a John Lennon song in there too, which I still feel I think it was probably recorded at the Dakota or something. In fact, because it was like a demo.
So songs start in the writing phase. Does the song inform a scene or a film, or is it just those are the sparks?
Sometimes it sparks something, or I have a scene in mind, and somehow the two things meet, and I start sort of shaping it around that. I'm working on a film now that we just finished shooting, and that has a big musical element, but they're not really songs in it. But it was still, the music was a big part of it. So I guess always for me, the music is a big thing.
I assume you're working with your soundtrack supervisor, Randall Poster, who's helped with all your. Can you guys talk about your process? I saw him talk at South by Southwest earlier this year, and he talked about working with you in the films, and it was great.
Yeah, well, Randy Poster, he's my music supervisor. We've been. I met him after we made Bottle Rocket. There was no soundtrack album, and they didn't want to do a soundtrack album. He wanted to do one, so he arranged that it would be put out, and then he worked on my movie starting then. And he's involved with the music in terms of we discuss what I've got in mind, and he suggests other things in that area, but he also is in charge of licensing and that stuff, and then he's very involved with working with composers and that aspect of it. And he's also a bit like a producer, just in the sense that he comes around a lot and sits with us in the cutting room and goes out to dinner, and he's just sort of stays in the mix. And I mean, that sounds like that's more important than I would have thought. His ideas and his reactions kind of come into the equation that way pretty significantly.
Is that part of the reason why, I mean, across the board, you've worked with a lot of the same collaborators, Robert, you've worked with Roman a few times now, and Noah, and even David Wasco, a lot of people who you work often, almost on every single one of your films.
Yes, Robert Yeoman is my director of photography. We've worked with, since Bottle Rocket, and I think many of the people that I've worked with are people who I got to know them because I was a fan. I'm lucky enough to be able to continue with them.
Can you conceive of working on a film without someone like Robert, who's almost...
Well, I never have. I made a short film in France, and he came in to, for the 2.5 days to make that short. I've done commercials and things with other people now and then, mostly with Bob. But he's somebody who I rely on.
I want to talk a little bit about the themes in your films, and again, maybe they're not conscious, and you're not thinking about them, and you don't analyze them. But there's a lot of failure in your films. Can you talk about that? The themes of failure, characters. You know, this is a family who have came of brilliance and prominence, and then sort of, you know.
Yeah.
168 forced on errors or whatever it is.
Right. Yes. Yeah. In fact, there's a scene in it where where Luke Wilson's character has a real kind of public meltdown on a tennis court, and that was one of the first scenes I had in mind for the movie. It's an interesting subject, you know. I mean, everybody deals with that in different ways, and sometimes it's not such a bad feeling. I think, but it's definitely something that's fascinating to me. I don't know why, but you know, it's also it's a pretty broad theme that lots of different things touch on, and you know, there's a lot there to work with.
Your character's not saving the day. It's a unique theme. I guess we should take some questions from the audience. Right there.
As far as the cinematography of your films, you were saying how Gene Hackman is very, he just likes to get straight into it, but all your shots are so calculated with like the lateral tracking and the cranes. I just wanted to know if you ever let Gene compromise any of your shots or how you dealt with that.
Yeah, well, in fact, that's interesting because he likes complicated. The thing is, he's so skilled that some blocking and some camera challenges. He's not somebody who wants it to be a documentary of his performance. He actually likes to have some. He likes to feel like he's now you're going to challenge me, just sort of technically. He always enjoyed that, and in fact, he's one of the few actors I've worked with where we were adding. I mean, there's one scene that he and Danny Glover have a scene near the end of the movie, and the whole scene they're jogging as they talk, and it wasn't meant to be that way. It was all because he wanted to do it that way. Often he would suggest, "Can I just do this on the way in? Can I start it at the door instead of when we get to the place?" So anyway, I think that's something he enjoyed. In fact, there's one shot in the movie somewhere around the end of the movie that he's got to be in two places. You know, it's a big, long kind of crane shot that goes all sorts of places, and he's in one part of it, and then other people do things, and then he's in another part of it, and he's got to kind of climb down literally off a fire engine, run around behind the camera, go show up somewhere else, and he was very happy doing it. And I think we did it like 23 times, which is not. He doesn't like to do anything, you know, 23 times. And he was perfectly fine. And also the shot ended with a kind of big dramatic moment with him and Ben Stiller. And he enjoyed that. I do remember Ben had said to me at the very beginning, somewhere early on, you know, I know we do a lot of these things, but that scene, though, can we have some close-ups and some coverage? And because I feel like, you know, I can tell from the way it's written that this is going to be sort of complicated. And I said, believe me, we're not going to do that in one thing. We're going to have some shots at the end, and you're just. But then then when the day came, somehow the coverage had gone away, and there was a moment where I looked at Ben and I sort of realized what he was thinking, and he just kind of shrugged and just shook his head, and then he just did it. So anyway.
Right there. Can we get a mic for this gentleman here?
How you doing, Mr. Anderson? Big fan of your work.
Oh, thank you.
I guess my question is that you've had the privilege over the years to work with a number of actors who are not only good with the script, but they're actually good at going off script and improvising, and they have a good sense of their characters. So was there a time in the rehearsal process or even on set where you just allowed your actors to be free to explore their characters and say what they needed, and did you capture that in the film?
Well, I feel like that's when the first movie I did, Bottle Rocket, we rehearsed for many years. You know, we didn't have any place else where we needed to be. that was the process for me. Also, I mean, you know, Owen was one of the actors rehearsing, so we're writing as we rewriting as we rehearse, and that was a big part of how we kind of made up that story in that movie. I've never had another movie where we really had that luxury, or anyway, where I had worked it out that way. I mean, I've had movies like Rushmore, the children that are in, and I include Jason Schwartzman, who he was 17, but you know, the young people that were in it, we rehearsed together for quite a while. The movie I just finished has a number of the people are 12. I rehearsed with them quite a bit. The grown-ups I never seem to have access to in advance. But that's exactly what I would like to. I feel like it's not the kind of thing I like to do on the set, really, but it is something I would like to do more in the preparation of the movie, because you know, there's just so much you can get out of that, but you've got to have a chance to shape it, and when you get on the set, it's, you know, especially if you have complicated-ish things that you're doing, that usually isn't, you know, if you're shooting a bunch of single shots of things, then it's much more, I think you have much more freedom with that, but I don't usually find myself in that situation, so we sort of have to figure it out in advance.
Thank you for coming. Directing children, how do you approach that differently from directing adults? Do you have a preference for either?
Well, I don't know if I have a preference for either. You know, it's whatever. Whenever there's a surprise, that's the thing I enjoy the most, and that can happen with anybody. With this movie I just did, the thing with the children was that I saw how different the process can be among a group of 12-year-olds. You know, in the same way that you know, Harvey Keitel probably has a very different process from, you know, from Owen Wilson. Two unknown 12-year-olds can have very different. They can have different kinds of preparation, and you know, there was one kid that I was working with in this movie who he really needed to understand why he was doing whatever he was doing, and it wasn't an act. It wasn't, you know, give me my motivation. It was, he just needed it to, and once he had that, he would, you know, make it feel real. But other kids, you know, I have often found the best way to work with them is to do it the way you want it and have them imitate that. And some kids are great at that. There's a kid in Rushmore who could do either way, but in terms of just having someone exactly recreate what you show them, he was unparalleled in that. You know, he was like an acting robot.
Which kid was that?
He's the blonde kid who's the sidekick of Jason Schwartzman's character.
Who appears in every scene as a kind of little ghost figure who dots.
He's named Dirk in it.
Oh, Dirk. I thought you meant the little boy.
No, that he doesn't really say anything.
Yeah. No. Well, Dirk's that Mason. He's a trained actor.
Mason
right?
Gamble. Yeah, he's very talented.
Let's take another question. How about right there in the green?
Hi, thank you for coming. I was wondering, you said you didn't go to film school. How did you get the funding and stuff to write and direct your first movie?
Well, I made a short that we made. Owen and I made. We borrowed some money from our fathers, like $4,000 or something. Which both, you know, it's a similarity between our fathers was they were both immediately on top of when are we going to get this back. They were. I mean, there was almost. We hadn't edited it. I don't know how they thought we were going to get revenue off of this thing. We've shot it, but we don't sell tickets for a movie that's being edited, and especially when it's 11 minutes long. But then to make a feature, it was really just luck, just chance, I think. We'd made this short, and it sort of found its way through various channels to different people, and one of them was was Polly Platt, who became one of the producers of the film, and I think she's the one who kind of there were other people. There's a guy named Kit Carson who was a kind of mentor for us for some years, and Polly worked for James L. Brooks, and he's the guy who made it all happen. But he chose us, but Polly was sort of the linchpin, I think.
How about right here?
When you said that you do the rehearsing, do you go through and do you block the actors yourself? And also, have you ever considered acting yourself? Is that something that you've thought about? And who are some of your favorite actors that you haven't worked with?
Well, let's see. The blocking, it depends on the scene. I think part of why I want to be able to rehearse more is I like the idea of doing what many directors do, which is we walk onto the stage or whatever the set, and everybody just does what they think of, and then you start guiding it. I almost never find myself in that situation. I'm always in something where we've got a set or a location that I've picked it because of the way we're going to stage this, and I'm sort of showing them what we're going to do. And also the other thing is I feel like so often we have built track and we've set up all this stuff hours before anybody's there. So anyway, I would like to combine these ways a bit more in the future because I think it'd be more fun and more sense of discovering things. But I was in a commercial once. That's the only acting I've done.
Hi, me and my friend Luke were watching Rushmore like a week ago or something like that, and we noticed there's quite a few mention of hand jobs. Is there any kind of psychological thing with that, or did it just happen to come up a lot?
I think we felt like it hadn't been done. You know, it was an area we wanted to get into in cinema. Yeah. It was an opportunity.
I wanted to ask you maybe a very broad question, but what is funny to you?
Yeah, I don't know. If I had a funny thing that I thought of to say to that, it would be great. But
it's not the awkward, it's not the painful, it's not the.
It so often is, and it's often the cruel, I think. But as soon as you start breaking it down too much, it becomes a drag.
Hi. I was waiting to hear voice British death. Anyway, I had read somewhere that you were inspired by J.D. Salinger's work. Assuming that's not slander, which ones in particular?
Well, there aren't so many. So I always loved I loved those short stories. At a certain point, when I was really obsessed with Salinger's work, now I'm sure they're all online, but I once went and got from various magazines, I Xeroxed all these stories that had not been collected, and there were quite a few, but I liked them all. Catcher in the Rye was the first thing I read, first thing everybody read by him probably, and I had that same reaction as all of my friends and so many people. But the whole Glass family cycle of things is a pretty impressive accomplishment, and his voice and style is, even though we know it so well, and it's hard not to for people to not to kind of start to reject it at a certain point. It's still pretty unique.
Hi, really nice to see you guys, because today I come here and I go through really like a kind of challenging situation, but I still keep going because I know I'm a filmmaker from Shanghai, and I also learn and work my film in LA. I know I can make something different. I really like to talk with you. I want to say, to be a director or filmmaker, we all know in the processing we need to just meet many challenges, and how you can keep going and just no matter how many people block you or just treat you really bad, and you still can keep going. Can you give me some suggestion? I'm really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think that you probably already know what to do. It sounds like you don't give up. Yes, I think you're doing it. You're doing it the right way. It is, especially if you have something in mind that is your own. Yes, you trust yourself already, so that's good. You have to just keep doing that.
Thank you. Here in the striped shirt, right? Yes, that gentleman. Right, he's got his hand.
A lot of your characters in many of your films go through this process where they achieve greatness and then they kind of fall from that. Do you feel that pressure in your professional life? And if so, like, do you feel like you learn from the characters in your films that go through that same process?
Well, I think I've made maybe 6 movies or maybe 7 movies, and I've had some do better than others, and it's always up and down. And I've more or less had all the different experiences, except for I have not experienced tremendous success. I've been spared that so far, but I would love to give that a try. I think. I do feel like I'm no great authority, but my own experience is kind of whatever happens, you sort of end up in the same place, which is now let's start the next one. Having so far been lucky enough to get to the next one and manage to put it together, but as she can attest, you can always figure out a way to do it. So I don't know. Does that answer that? Okay, thank you. Maybe we should call on her.
Okay, we're going to
she's
take one more. Hurry up.
I had a question sort of about the general look of your films. A lot of people comment and, they always have this well-manicured look, and I think some people miss what, people find it twee or something like that, but they miss the theme that's trying to get across. So I would like to hear what you feel that, what you try to achieve by having that kind of style.
Well, I think maybe the style of a movie, it's a combination of so many things, the setting and what kind of characters they are, and maybe a sort of world that you're trying to create, which sometimes I have a sort of idea of something that we're going to kind of concoct. But then there's also just my own personality that becomes a part of it, and I think that kind of that's the thing I don't know if I control so much. It just ends up being the way I would do it. But I think I like everybody. We're so influenced by so many different things, and ideas come from every different direction. And that's one of the things I like about making movies, is just sort of being able to pull things from everywhere. That's it.
All right, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wes.
Thanks.
Remember, this podcast can be found on our website or on iTunes, itunes.com/Apple Store. And you can also pick up the Apple Store app on your iPhone or iPod or iPad and find out about all kinds of great upcoming events. Thank you so much, and have a great night.